Morning, folks. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ian Bushie. I'm the Minister of Natural Resources and Indigenous Futures. We're here to provide another regular update on the wildfire situation, our evacuation efforts, and to address any questions that may arise. I just want to update folks as well. Just this morning, the Premier is in Flin Flon, meeting with the firefighters boots on the ground, including our American firefighters that are up there, which has gone very well. And I think what we want to be able to take away from some of that is the fact that we are truly all hands on deck when it comes time to the firefighting effort here in Manitoba, but what it means not only across the country, but internationally as well too. So I do want to kind of shout that out a little bit. The assistance we've received from BC, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Parks Canada, and our friends from the United States as well too. And right now we have 229 personnel. And earlier on in the firefighting season, we did have assistance from Alberta. So it's been very positive to see a truly all hands on deck approach. And this tireless effort that we've taken on has been significant. And I can't thank our firefighting and our Manitoba Wildfire Service enough for all the work that they've done and all the effort that they put in. But while we sit here today, we have had some rain in certain areas of the province, but it's met with kind of cautiously optimistic, if you will, because with the rain sometimes comes lightning as well too. So those are things that we have eyes on for potential new starts in the coming days going forward. And again, we're not out of the wildfire season yet. Actually, I would almost hazard to say we're not even in the height of our wildfire season yet. So as we go on, I'm encouraging Manitobans to be very fire smart and vigilant as we talked about human starts. Again, the human start does not necessarily mean somebody took a lighter or a match. Sometimes it's just about activity in the backwoods as well too. So I encourage folks to be fire smart, be vigilant, pay attention to the fire bans and the restrictions that are appropriate to the certain areas that you are in the province. Many evacuees we know are anxious to get back home, and we're working hard to make sure you can do that in a safe way when time is ready. So I'll pass it to Kristen. She can speak to the kind of the regional geographic areas of the fires.
Okay, great, thank you. So Kristen Hayward, Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for the Wildfire Service with Natural Resources and Indigenous Futures. After a brief but much appreciated period of cooler temperatures, we are seeing a return to higher fire danger levels across the province. We do have moderate fire danger levels across most areas with potential for holdover lightning starts from thunderstorms that move through the province over the last couple of days. Sometimes it can take 2 to 5 days for fires to show up after lightning moves through, so we're always keeping an eye on that. We continue to make really good progress to contain fires near communities. Our main objectives obviously are to continue work on the flanks adjacent to the communities, to set up and maintain valley protection and patrol for any spot fires and also any new starts from lightning. As temperatures rise, the potential for flare-ups does increase, so the fires may be kind of laying low in these cooler, wetter temperatures, and then as soon as the sun pops out and heats them, all of a sudden you start seeing smokes pop up, so we want to be ready for those. Because of that, we want to be confident that we have really good containment before we're allowing folks back. I know on the ground it can look like the situation is really improving over the last little while, but just as we look ahead at the weather that's coming, we want to be really certain that we have a good handle on things before people repatriate. So as of end of day yesterday, there were 25 fires burning in the province. 9 of those were out of control. There were 116 fires to date, and the 20-year average for June 11th is 105. Despite that lightning, we have not had any new starts in the last 24 hours, and no significant growth has been observed in recent days on any of the fires. So I won't go through fire by fire because most of the sizes haven't changed. There's not a lot to report there. Things are relatively stable or improving with a lot of these fires. I'll just highlight Fire 61 was remapped. That's the Bird River Nopaming fire. That one is now being mapped at just over 218,000 hectares. And when today's bulletin and information comes out, we will likely see that Fire 63 in the White Shell is being changed from out of control status to being held status. So a good improvement on that fire there. That means basically that we don't expect, there's not a high risk of that fire to spread. And as the minister said, we do continue to receive generous support from other partners. We've augmented our own firefighting resources in the Wildfire Service by almost double with firefighters from out of province. However, as we see activity increasing in BC and Alberta, we know that those jurisdictions are, bringing resources back to deal with fires in their own provinces. But we continue to be well supported by the U.S. And that's it for me today.
Thank you. I'm Christine Stevens. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Manitoba Emergency Management Organization. Currently, there are 25 states of local emergency in Manitoba. I would like to share, though, that the RM of Alexander's state of local emergency has now ended. There are currently 27 communities that remain evacuated due to wildfire threat, and there are 6 that are evacuated due to wildfire smoke impacts. There have been no new evacuations in the past 24 hours. Currently, there are over 2,100 registered evacuees with the Red Cross. And the RM of Kelsey has announced that folks from Cranberry Portage will be able to return home as of 8 a.m. on June 14th. I'll now hand it over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Christine. Hi, everyone. I want to take the opportunity today to, address some of the things we've heard in the media and social media that might be raising concern for people. So I want to clarify that evacuees do not need to travel to Winnipeg to verify their identity to receive financial support through the Canadian Red Cross. The Red Cross is validating evacuees' information without requiring travel through local in-person meetings and through phone interviews. The province has been flowing aid to residents of municipalities and Northern Affairs communities, and Indigenous Services Canada with MKO is responsible for issuing federal aid to support First Nations community members in Manitoba. We continue to work with our partners at all levels to ensure every Manitoban receives financial support at this time. The province has assumed security at the Lila Congregate Shelter in partnership with MKO, First Nations, and community safety officers, Winnipeg Police Services, St. Anne's Police Service, and the Turtle Team. Work is also underway to boost mental health and crisis response services that are trauma-informed and designed in collaboration with partners. This evacuation has been significant. It is the largest domestic air operation in the Canadian military's history. And behind the scenes, there are hundreds of volunteers, crisis support workers, healthcare workers, and administrators, and many, many more supporting their fellow Manitobans at this time. So I really want to take a moment to thank everyone who has played such a big role in this effort. Not only folks who work in these fields that I've identified, but hundreds and hundreds of public servants who also put their name forward to be redeployed for these support efforts. So thank you to everyone who's contributing. There's a lot of invisible support, and we appreciate all of it. And we can now move on to questions.
Why did the province take over security? What were some of the concerns that you were hearing at the Lila site?
I think it's important to remember that when we're evacuating over 21,000 people, it's like a small city, right? A small city of people who have needs, who have healthcare needs, mental health care needs, addictions, as well as trauma. A lot of folks have come out of a very traumatic situation, having to evacuate and be in the city, and a lot of folks are vulnerable. If we remember, for folks coming from communities where they don't have a lot of exposure to the city and to some of the risks that could be here for people traveling from somewhere else that's in a vulnerable situation, it's really important to have solid security in place to keep Manitobans safe.
Who was previously doing security, and were there any issues with that security firm, or what weren't they accomplishing that you wanted to accomplish?
I think the focus here is just making sure that there's layers of support in place, and we're best poised to pull in key partners in order to coordinate and do that.
You were mentioning 229 personnel currently, but you also did say many of those from BC will have to go back to their province once things get worse over there. And then also mentioning not even the height of our fire season yet, is the province looking at other opportunities to bring in firefighters or personnel outside of British Columbia or those other areas that we might be losing some to?
Sure, it's something that we do every day. We're always looking at what do we have now, which of those resources are scheduled to be leaving soon, what do we expect our fire behavior to potentially be doing based on forecast, what do we think we're going to need, and how are the fires responding to the action we're doing right now. Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into those discussions. We do work very closely with the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre to always make sure that we're making requests, putting in what Manitoba's needs are, and if we were able to help, would we also be expressing what we have available to support other provinces if we were in that position. So it's something that we're constantly reevaluating and making sure that we understand what's out there available to us and speaking up for what we need.
There's been some talk of scams going around with text and email sent to evacuees. Has the province received any formal, reports of these scams? And if so, what is your response?
Do you want to take that?
Sure. We are aware that we've seen those posts on social media. We are aware we've received reports of that. And we're asking Manitobans to ensure that they're responding to official communications through the Red Cross. Don't provide your information to third parties or anything that's unvalidated. And a good way to verify that is to go to MB Ready or the Red Cross website directly. If you're receiving a request for information, you can go to that site directly and call in yourself to the official number, and that's a really good way to protect yourself from these scams.
I spoke with the York Factory First Nation chief this morning, who is sending his residents back to the community because of the way they're being treated at hotels. They say they're not getting meals adequately or at all. How is the province working with these hotels to ensure that evacuees are getting what they need and in a timely manner?
So the York Factory chief is on daily calls with the province, working out any concerns that they might have, and we, in turn, again with folks housed now up to, I believe it's 74 different hotels across the province. It takes a significant amount of coordination effort that we are working on every day to ensure that people's needs are met in a timely manner and that they're kept safe.
Have you spoken personally with the York Factory chief about some of these concerns that he's having?
The chief is on a daily call with senior political staff.
How many meals are people supposed to get in hotels? Is it 3 meals a day? Is there any difference compared to what they might have been getting in the evacuation shelter? I know there are fewer people in those shelters now, but is it the same in hotels?
Yeah, people are receiving adequate meals every day. They're receiving 3 meals a day through hotels or through the shelter.
And how are they getting those meals? Is it through the Red Cross or is a hotel providing them? I know it's complicated, but if you could explain that.
There's a number of different arrangements in place because people are all over in different communities in Manitoba where perhaps the Red Cross doesn't have an in-person presence, but catering or arrangements are made with hotels. There's a variety of ways that need is addressed, depending on, the logistics in the community.
Are you able to go into details about why residents from Cranberry Portage are able to go back?
Sure. So obviously that's a decision that's made by the local authority to, take the evacuation orders, remove those evacuation orders, pardon me. And so they've done that in consultation with our local wildfire service staff in discussions about fire behavior. The fire that was predominantly a concern to them is no longer a concern to the community, and so they felt comfortable making that call for their residents.
Some other communities are starting to work on reentry plans. Flin Flon, Pimicikamak Cree Nation. What role is the Wildfire Service playing in helping them develop those plans and figuring out a date?
A date is very hard to establish, but what we can do some work to predict is what we think the fire might do, what work have we done to protect the community. So it's ourselves as the Wildfire Service in consultation with Office of the Fire Commissioner in many of those communities who are have a unified command with us in Flin Flon, for example, meeting with local community representatives, their emergency management personnel, to give them the situational updates, and then also to discuss at what point would it be appropriate to do certain activities. So for example, do they need to bring their water systems back online? Do they need to bring a hospital back online? What is their access like into and out of the community, and what are the fires around that doing? How could that impact? So those discussions are happening daily with teams to make a plan and understand at what point certain decisions can be made.
The minister mentioned this was the largest domestic air operation by the military. Is the military going to be required to bring people back when the time comes too, or how will that happen?
So that's something that will be coordinated at the local and provincial level. The Canadian Air Force will not be involved in bringing people home.
There's been lots of talk about how this has happened quite early in our fire season. We haven't even really hit our fire season. I know it might be hard to predict, but are you able to say, because I know there's been lots of conversations about future evacuations, making sure things are okay before going back to a community so they don't have to get evacuated again. But are you able to say like what's being done now to ensure that there aren't evacuations later in the summer?
You know, it's, Kristen can speak to the technical elements in terms of repatriation and how they determine a community is safe to return. But, you know, the wildfire element is unpredictable, right? So the best thing that communities can do is prepare to be fire smart in the long term. I mean, we're into the season right now, and have plans in place should they need to evacuate. But, you know, it's hard to predict if and when that will continue to happen this year. It'll depend on a lot of different factors.
We have a question on Zoom.
Yes. One reporter joining us on Zoom today. We'll follow our usual one question, one follow-up format for Zoom, and I'll turn it over to Timur Durrani from the Globe and Mail.
Hello, hope you guys can hear me. This is Timur Durrani from the Globe and Mail. I have a question. I think, Minister Naylor, you can answer this, particularly because you implored all travelers within and from outside Manitoba to reconsider any non-essential travel, as the government requires more hotel rooms for wildfire evacuees. I have a few questions about that. So first, I kind of want to just ask you, on a technical level, I was hoping you could elaborate and explain for us how hotels are compensated when evacuees are placed there by organizations. I'm wondering, is it the same rate as they would be paid by any other paying guest, or is it lower? And if that's not being paid, could you explain how the province would help with their expenses? Because, you know, Manitoba businesses rely on summer revenue, and if they don't make that, they won't survive, throwing this economy into a spiral. So I'm hoping you can understand why these questions are coming up, and you can answer that a bit.
Yeah, that is a technical question. I'm going to turn it over to our EMO director.
Yeah, so in this event, the Canadian Red Cross is working directly with hotels to source the availability. I can't speak to the rates they are or aren't negotiating with the hotels at this time.
Yeah, you know, I guess, well, then I'll follow up because, I mean, I guess what we're trying to understand here is because a lot of these operators are speaking out about that they don't have any clarity on this. I mean, it's a very sticky situation, particularly because obviously they want to help these evacuees. But many of these operators that we're speaking about are really, and that are relying on this tourism and summer revenue, some of them are nowhere near these fires. So when the province is telling people not to do any non-essential travel, and it's extending to those areas where these fires don't exist, could you help elaborate for us and understand how that works in a summer season when, again, for the rest of the year, this is exactly the time they're making their bread and butter, you know?
Yeah, I'd be happy to respond to that. I just want to remind everyone in the room and who's watching online that Manitoba is in a state of emergency. This doesn't happen very often. And so we are having to work together in ways that don't happen every day. And we are asking everyone to contribute to the efforts to keep spaces open. I do want to clarify that we aren't housing people close to where the fires are, so that isn't really a factor. We do have people in hotels in 14 different communities across the province at this time. We don't know what the future holds. You've probably heard the questions that have just come up about we're early in the fire season, and we don't know what other kinds of evacuations may happen. We also don't know at this point, you know, we may have thousands of Manitobans away from home for weeks ahead. So the ask is that people will reconsider non-essential travel. We're not dictating what is essential to people, but I've already heard some great anecdotal stories of families who were, planning a staycation for the end of school, and they said, you know what, I can do that in September. Or when this problem's over, right? People can make good decisions to support these efforts that thousands of Manitobans are pitching in on and thousands more are affected by. So I do repeat the ask for people to reconsider non-essential travel and to know that we're working closely with Manitoba Tourism and the Manitoba Hotels Association, as well as other partners, to try and get the word out and to work through concerns as they arise.
Thanks, Minister. That's all from Zoom. We'll send things back to the room.
Speaking to a wildfire expert yesterday, I learned a new term. I hadn't heard it before. They were describing a gigafire, referring to a fire over 400,000 hectares. The reason it came up is they were talking about Puckatawagan and Flin Flon and perhaps merging. I know that was a fear earlier in the week. I guess first part of the question, your thoughts on that as a term. We describe these large fires, and two, where do we sit? Is there going to be a merge there potentially, or where are we now?
That's a new term to me. Luckily, we haven't had to use that term in Manitoba in my experience. In terms of them merging, they are still technically apart from one another, so it's a possibility. They are quite close together, but the communities, though, that are on either end of that large fire or kind of in the middle are pretty well protected at this point. We've made good efforts there. So even if they did merge, I'm not sure there'd be significant community impacts coming out of that. Just maybe a new term to use.
They also mentioned perhaps a thing that's played a role in the fire season we've seen is probably since 2013, we had very little fire or hectares burned. And they were saying that's created a lot of fuel that's been out there in the north, and that has played, it was almost like they described it as a matchbox waiting, and it got the right spark, and that's what we're seeing now. Would that be a fair reflection?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the contributing factors for sure. The fire won't burn if there isn't fuel for it to consume, so.
For evacuees who have been, some of them out of their home for weeks and so forth, maybe losing hope, what message do you have to them?
Well, my message to evacuees is that your Manitoba government is here for you. We are working in partnership with your First Nation leaders and as well as municipal leaders and Northern Affairs leaders. This is a team effort with dozens of meetings daily and hundreds and thousands of people contributing to the effort on a daily basis. So I encourage Manitobans to hang on. I hope that some folks will get to enjoy some of the opportunities that exist in some of the communities where they've been evacuated to, whether it's a park event in Brandon or something downtown in Winnipeg that with music. There are ways to spend some time together. I know there's lots of communities also, or lots of organizations also hosting special events for evacuees. And so I know it's a tough time. I know this is probably incredibly traumatic and incredibly hard for everybody involved, but know that your government is here for you and that we're working every day towards your safety and towards your return home.
Sort of a two-part question here. Federal data showed this morning that we're on track to have the second worst wildfire season on record across the country. I mean, for Manitoba, we're not even at the height of our wildfire season yet. Are you worried that we're going to run out of resources to battle these fires? And then looking forward, are we looking at preparation, buying more water bombers, training more wildland firefighters? What's the thought there?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered the question there at the end there as well too in terms of the water bomber efforts. So we have put ourselves in the queue for new water bombers. That'll be on, I believe, 2030, 2031. They'll be coming online for 3 new bombers that we put a down payment on this year. But also ramping up the service as well too is significant. And you're hearing those calls from the communities where we have people, boots on the ground in the communities, want to be able to fight in this effort. So as we go forward, being able to staff that up and being able to enhance the service. So when it comes time to have extreme fire seasons, we're not being reactive, we're being more proactive, which is absolutely what we want to be able to do going forward.
And What about this year? I mean, each province is battling their own wildfires. Are we gonna run out of resources in Manitoba?
I wouldn't, yeah, I think your phrasing of the earlier question was, are we worried about that? I wouldn't say we're worried about that, but we are mindful of the fact that we're only in June and we will have fires in July, August, and into September. So we do have to be mindful of how we're utilizing the resources, making sure that we are focusing on the health and safety, including, you know, the mental health of the responders on the ground, that they're getting rest when they need rest. And so part of that is looking to augment our resources with other resources from other areas, using other civil servants where we can to fill roles, overhead roles, logistics roles, to try to take some of the pressure off folks and make sure everyone is safe and well taken care of. It's a marathon, not a sprint here at this point.
Sorry. The federal government just did an update press conference saying there were 33 First Nation communities across the country that had been evacuated. I wanted to know how many of those were from Manitoba.
We can follow up with numbers afterwards if that works.
Okay. And also, my colleague is asking, is the province involved in the York residents being sent back to home, and has there been flights organized? Do you know anything about that or no, logistically?
The Canadian Red Cross is working with Indigenous Services Canada and the community to coordinate those flights back home.
Last question?
Can I ask a question on another matter? Just we've been hearing from rural communities about poor cell service and reception. In the RM of St. Laurent, the community says the issue's gotten so bad it's beginning to affect the fire department's ability to contact crews and residents while responding to 911 calls. And they've been trying to get telecom companies to build new towers in the area, so far to no avail. Has the province heard these concerns, and what is the province doing to try and bring more telecom providers to rural Manitoba?
Yeah, so we've absolutely heard the concerns, and not just during wildfire season. This is a concern that we've heard for some time as well too. So we've been advocating on behalf of the province and behalf of municipalities as well too, to the federal government to be at the table to have these conversations, so we can have enhanced cell service, but also enhanced 911 service across Manitoba. Because as I mentioned, we're not just hearing this during wildfire season. Obviously, we're hearing it more significantly so as we go through this season. But just an overall connectivity for Manitoba, it's a priority for us, and we are advocating in terms of bringing the feds to the table to have that discussion as to how do we build up that service stronger.
Is there something that the province could do in terms of offering incentives to some of these telecom companies to make it more attractive, given the relative lack of population in those areas? But perhaps the province could do something in the way of incentives to make it more attractive for some of these companies?
I think we're open to all parts of the conversation as to how we can attract business, how we can attract and incentivize investment in Manitoba, investment in northern Manitoba and central Manitoba. But this isn't just a north-central issue as well too. This is also an issue in southern Manitoba. So in terms of being able to connect the entirety of the province, absolutely we want to be able to have that discussion as to how we can encourage, how we can incentivize, and how we can really bring the telecom companies to the table and the feds as well.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.